Hey everyone, it's been a year since Endwalker came out, and the newest World of Warcraft expansion is here, so I shouldn't have to say spoiler warning, but I'm gonna do it anyway. The following video contains some pretty big spoilers for Final Fantasy XIV Endwalker and World of Warcraft Shadowlands, because this video is about the final bosses of these expansions and how on paper they appear to be the exact same thing. I'm sure some of you are aware of that Final Fantasy XIV versus World of Warcraft video I made last year, and as a fan of both WoW and FF14, for, to be honest, entirely different reasons, I still find myself comparing the two from time to time, what one does well compared to the other and vice versa. And if you've ever seen a stream or let's play of mine, you know I am a fan of tropes. I love them. I love being able to see them coming from a mile away. It's honestly how I end up guessing the plot to most of the things I play, and it's why I love a good mystery. And for those of you who don't know what I'm talking about, a trope is a common convention in a particular medium. Something used enough to be recognized as that thing. Storytelling uses tropes all the time, and these two games love their tropes. Things like the enemy of my enemy trope, the tragic villain trope, the magic is a monster magnet trope, or one of my favorites, the chivalrous pervert trope. All of these are examples of tropes, and there are so many tropes. And yeah, I enjoy some more than others. One of the ones I've never been a fan of, but MMOs love to do, is the true final boss, or man behind the man, or greater scope villain trope. All of which can really just be summed up like this. You arrive at the final boss of a video game, and as you do a battle, they say something along the lines of like, "You fools, all this evil stuff I've been doing is actually to prevent something much worse from happening, and that worse guy, you don't even know him yet, but he's terrible." And then, depending on the scope of the game, the guy either shows up right then as the form of something totally insane, or in the case of most MMORPGs, they become the focus of the next expansion. I think it's safe to say we've all seen this before, and it drives me crazy, because I've always thought it just seems like they were kicking the narrative can down the road. But I will admit, it is a great and easy hook to get people invested on what's to come next. But with that said, it can get very stale, very quick, which is why I am very much over it. So when both Final Fantasy XIV and World of Warcraft Shadowlands release expansions where the villain we start chasing at the beginning turns out not to be the final boss of the expansion, but instead is that other even worse thing. In this case, the Endsinger and the Jailer. Two characters that we know nothing about. We're about to enter a game where we have zero connection to the villain, and even worse, don't really know or care about their motivations. And yes, that was the case with Shadowlands. So then how the hell did Final Fantasy XIV make it work? Well, let's start with the baseline of Shadowlands. When you look at what they're trying to do, it seems like a creative outing. Just the very concept of setting your expansion in the afterlife is a pretty huge undertaking. And going into the expansion, we're dealing with an enemy who's undead, Sylvanas, spent the previous expansion murdering her way through Azeroth and pissing everyone off, except you Undercity fans, I see you. As the story progressed, it was very clear something more was going on. There was something happening behind the scenes. She had a dark master, but she still claimed that she was doing her evil deeds for a reason. And in the run-up to Shadowlands, it was revealed her dark master was the Jailer. Obviously, from my perspective, I think the entire thing ended up being a big failure. In an effort to have diverse zones and new characters, we spent a lot of time focusing on stuff that I didn't feel was all that important. There didn't really seem to be a lot of cohesion between the zones, except for the Game of Thrones level politics happening between the leaders. And the stuff I did want to see more of and hopefully get answers to really wasn't delivered. I figured this expansion would give us a lot of Sylvanas' story, maybe even explain why everyone kept telling us that she was morally gray, but we didn't really get any of that. And by the time her story wrapped up, we didn't even get to see a reunion between her and Nathanos, right? Because the story quickly had to move on to explaining what the hell her boss was up to. A man who at that point in the story you've seen being evil in a few cutscenes, but is really still shrouded in mystery. We kind of know what he wants to do, but we don't know why, we don't know what his end goal is. It's really the quintessential problem with the true final boss or man behind the man trope. We're told by people we just met, who we're told are important, to go kill this guy because it's for the greater good. And that is pretty much what we do. We're still never really told why he's doing any of the things he's doing, but we know that he's going to rewrite reality, and it's our job to stop him. Once he's defeated, we're shown a very quick and pretty flimsy explanation of why he did what he did. But at that point, honestly, it's way too late. apparently he was once the arbiter of the afterlife and decided the first one's creations were defective and unable to withstand the, yeah, you got it, greater scope villain to come. Yeah, that's right. The one true final boss who we've come to learn has orchestrated everything since the beginning of us playing. It's actually revealed that there is another something that's even worse than he is, and it's coming, and he was trying to be prepared for it, I guess, and now you, the player, have to stick around to the next expansion, I assume, in order to find out more. So yeah, that sucked, and it still sucks saying it out loud again. But it should at least be understandable why it sucks now. There was nothing at stake for the player. Sure, you're told there was, but I don't know anyone who found the jailer fight resonate with them on an emotional level other than, oh look, new loot. So then let's bring it back and ask again, how on earth could this increasingly lame trope end up so differently in Final Fantasy XIV? Well, before we even start, Final Fantasy XIV is a story-heavy game, unlike WoW. So the onus is on the 14 dev team to make this trope work. They've got more real estate in their game for storytelling, but still, it's not an easy trope to make good. So let's start with the previous expansion. Just like Battle for Azeroth, the story beats were being set up in Final Fantasy XIV Shadowbringers. In it, the villain mentions that the reasoning for all their schemes was that, long ago, their people were killed in a great calamity, and the cause was this mysterious song or sound from space. It warped their world, killed countless people, and only by creating their dark deity Zodiark, the same Zodiark we've been trying to fight since the beginning, could they stop this mysterious song. But you know, it's still kind of an amorphous concept, a weird footnote that is really not delved into. And like Shadowlands, the plot of Endwalker is pretty straightforward. I mean, if you keep the end of Shadowbringers vague enough, it does kind of sound like BFA as well. The secret behind-the-scenes evil corrupting our world from the beginning has finally been defeated. The last villain, the one who's been in front of our face the entire time, who is essentially at this point our arch-nemesis, has gone forth to create a battleground for one last epic showdown. And so even knowing it's a trap, we march forth into the unknown, and there the expansion begins. And for Final Fantasy XIV, instead of Sylvanas, it's Xenos. And we're all like, this asshole's gonna go merge with Zodiark and become some final villain. It seemed like a pretty easy theory craft. But when we, the player, finally stand face to face with Zodiark, everyone playing was asking the exact same question. Hold up, why are we doing this at level 83? We're not even halfway through the expansion. That's right, the game pulls the old switcheroo on you, and the big final boss we've been promised for 10 years is defeated. Oh, but remember that little tidbit about Zodiark being the thing that stopped the mysterious song? Well, it's back. And so, early in the expansion, the story completely shifts its focus to stopping this mysterious force we've never met before and honestly, have never really cared about. And this is when the Final Fantasy XIV team spends the next 20 hours of gameplay showing you why you should care. Sure, they take us to new places, we meet new characters, but the focus is returning to the places we know and love. The world you, the player, have been defending for a main game and 4 expansions is literally on fire. The same chaos that swallowed the world in the past is happening again. Except instead of just being told it happened, you're now seeing it happen in real time. People are dying, cities are burning, and those people who still live are wailing with despair to the point where they turn into literal monsters, who then kill more and cause more destruction, and then in turn create more monsters. It's absolutely terrible. But it isn't just the stakes we're shown, we're also shown why it's all happening to begin with. Our old enemies, the Ascians, which have been a thorn in our side from the beginning, long ago in the before times when they were known as the Ancients, beings of unlimited and unparalleled power, it was, unbeknownst to any of them, one of their own that set all of this in motion. You know, without getting way too into it, and there is a lot, imagine if you had unlimited power, lived forever, and every single thing you ever wanted, you could just will into being. It was a perfect utopia. But just like when you see a rich dude who's also really depressed, having it all doesn't mean that you're happy. And one ancient felt this very way. As he slipped further into depression, he decided to create a multiplicity of messengers, his little birds to fly across the stars in search of hope. Surely, out there, somewhere amongst the stars, was his answer. Surely someone had found a reason for him to keep going. And his little birds, these childlike beings of wonder, were designed specifically with emotionality in mind. And in their mind, their whole objective was just to come back with some good news for Dad. And so these little bird children, made of pure emotion, venture off into the stars in order to find hope for a man who has none and run directly into the Fermi paradox. Now, if you don't know what the Fermi paradox is, I'm not going to deep dive it for you. Just go Google it. It's fascinating. But the general gist is, if the universe is very, very old and there are countless galaxies, and in those countless galaxies, countless worlds, then we most certainly would have seen some alien civilization. So why don't we? And the philosophical, scientific theory crafting begins from there. Trust me, read up on it. It falls directly into the existential dread category, and Final Fantasy XIV doesn't shy away from this. Yes, his creations do discover there's life out there, but the answer to the question of, is there hope for me out there? The answer isn't one that he's gonna like. Every single world and civilization, no matter how big or small or powerful or collapsing or polluted or whatever, every single one was engulfed by hopelessness and despair. And realizing that there is no external hope or joy for their creator to bring back to him, they come to the conclusion that this is the fate of all living beings in the universe. Even the universe itself in time will come to a dark, sad end. And so they join together for one final song to end suffering and despair and to grant one final kindness, oblivion. Like I said, it gets dark, and I'm sure by now you're like, okay, Jesse, I get it. So the difference is essentially you're fighting the concept of death in Warcraft and the concept of despair in Final Fantasy XIV. And the reason 14 works so well is because you gave a detailed backstory, and it makes it hit home why it's important. And you would be totally wrong, because the reason 14 is better has nothing to do with the backstory of the villain. Your character has spent numerous expansions facing hopeless situation after hopeless situation, always emerging victorious. It's a theme of the game that you aren't just a mere adventurer anymore. You're a beacon of hope that lights the way for others. Your actions, even the smallest of kindnesses, inspire others to be better. And now you're probably like, okay, so there's a lot of emotional resonance that connects this expansion back to older expansions. But even that's not the complete answer, because the real reason this boss works is something I think the developers picked up on early in telling this story. Creating a moment like this to end a 10-year story arc in an MMORPG where everyone's experience is a little bit different, the only way to deliver that boss fight is to, one, acknowledge this journey was never about the character. It was about you, the player, who's going through your own shit and your own struggles, and the entire expansion is an acknowledgement that despite any despair in your own life, you're still here. And two, fan service. Lots of fan service. So put together, what does that mean? Well, it's another trope, but honestly, it's one of my favorites. The game reminds you that everything you've done up until now has mattered, and every person you've met, just like in real life, walks away with an impression of you. And in this game, you leave a great impression, because as the final day approaches, the people of the world unite behind you, friends and former enemies, to help rocket you to the stars. Hell, even the primals, the very gods you've gone up against countless times, offer themselves up to power your ship to the stars. And don't even get me started on the final zone. It is designed to make you cry, a tribute to all who have given so much to help your character get there, their voices cheering you on to the end. So it should come as no surprise that when you stand there, 1v1, facing the Endsinger, you're interrupted by your arch nemesis, a character you've been battling for some time now who just wants one final throwdown with you. And there he is, totally confused as to how on earth this thing is still alive.
I take it this is your prey. But why does it still live? Surely it is no match for you. I assumed you would be above something so banal as despair.
He sees this fight for what it is. nothing that can stop you.
So come, let us dispense with this distraction, you and I.
And so we ride into the final boss fight on the back of our arch nemesis to a medley of previous final boss music. The final encounter of Endwalker isn't about the boss, it's about you. The road that you've walked, the hours and hours you, the player, have put into the game. The musical medley is a reminder of that. But like any good final boss fight, there's a second phase. But this isn't their second phase. The Endsinger thinks they killed us. This is our second phase. And the boss music is our theme song. Yes, it is literally a power of friendship moment, and honestly, it's perfect. And just like when you play a boss for the first time and don't know the mechanics and suddenly they gain all their life back, the Endsinger goes from strategic attacks and throwing planets at you to now wildly flailing in order to prevent the light from engulfing it. Because despite knowing that the Endsinger may be correct, that in the end we all fade away, you never lose hope. The Final Fantasy XIV writers saw what they had to do, make this trope about another big bad who's way worse out there, and not only did they set out to deliver a backstory, but they also made it clear that that part wasn't even all that important, because the real story is acknowledging where you started, where you've been, and those you've met along the way. The good, the bad, all of it. Not just in a video game, but in your life. And that shit is universally beautiful. And so we circle back to World of Warcraft, which seems lacking in comparison. But because of who I am, you know I can't just let it sit at that. I have some ideas of how I would have changed Shadowlands. And trust me when I say I've thought about this, it's not even that complicated. I don't have to change the theme or even the overall structure of the expansion. Shadowlands could have been roughly the same, except the focus always should have been on fan service. Just like a quick social experiment, if you'll allow me. You've died or taken a weird portal, you're in the afterlife. Is your priority going to be deep diving the political infighting and machinations of various factions? Or would you go find a lost friend or family member? Maybe plan a lunch date with a dead celebrity you always admired? Why they thought anyone would give a damn about the truly unimportant characters that manage the afterlife. The focus of the expansion from the beginning should have been about giving a send-off to the characters players both loved and hated for the last 15 or 20 years. Just giving the players that little bit of closure on just a few storylines would allow them to finally work in all those other characters that have to sit on the sidelines for every other expansion. Also wrapping up plot points like, oh, I don't know, the giant sword, or the fact that everyone's favorite Draenei is now a literal genocidal maniac. So like I was saying, we don't even have to really change that much. We can work with the zones we were given. The plot of Bastion should have been about Arthas, Uther, and Jaina coming together and forgiving each other. Maldraxxus should have given us some amazing send-offs to heroes that we've known throughout the series, like Saurfang maybe meeting his son in the afterlife, Bane and Cairn getting closure. Hell, the group of them could have teamed up in that zone, and then it would have made the scene later where Anduin breaks free all that much more special, and then waiting for him there would have been his father. That's such a good emotional moment. All the support in his life helping him through that moment. Come on. Revendreth would have been about the villains we fought and potentially seeing another side to them. Maybe underneath all that hatred and anger and rage, there's some good in them. Except Garrosh, who is still an unforgivable giant piece of shit. But then seeing all these other people change, maybe even Arthas can be your guide through this area, add some even more weight to his character and his unwillingness to budge. And then Ardenweald, I honestly think what they have in the game already is pretty good, close to what I would have done, but it would have been entirely about Tyrande coming to grips with her failure and the people that she lost forgiving her. We keep the dragon plot stuff and we use that as a through line for the next expansion. Now, why did we do all this, Jesse, you may ask? Well, it all comes together in the final fight, where, again, because who gives a damn about the jailer, this moment is for you, the player. This guy thinks he's some unstoppable evil that's gonna wipe out reality, but you are the champion of Azeroth, and this time, you brought your friends. Yes, I am 100% stealing from Final Fantasy XIV, but some of WoW's best stuff is stolen from other games. So as you're battling the jailer with your raid, imagine it looks like he's gonna wipe you, and then the music swells, and from the sides, Jaina and Arthas and Uther appear, but wait! That's not all. Tyrande and the countless wisps of Teldrassil descend from above. All the warriors of the past, we're talking your favorite characters from the beginning. They're coming through portals like it's endgame. And just for good measure, Garrosh, who has been a dick through the entire expansion, who probably, in my version, would have been the final boss of a raid or a dungeon, he comes through like no one's gonna end reality unless it's me, you son of a bitch. Can you even imagine how hyped this fight would be? And that's not even a detailed version, that's just an idea. But that moment alone would have the fanbase hyped for countless expansions to come because the payoff for caring was there. And it all comes back to that, really, acknowledging the people who play your game, especially in MMORPG, are your game. Without them, the world dies. It's okay to give your players something every now and again that says, we get you. And I truly, from the bottom of my heart, hope the new direction WoW seems to be headed with Dragonflight is the start of something new for the game. Because it's so sad that a game that I played for 15 years couldn't find a way to connect with me as a player in a setting that very much should have. Yet a game that I just started playing 2 years ago has managed to consistently and in unexpected ways do things that a lot of AAA game developers simply aren't willing to do. And so to stick with the theme, I hope to see great things from both these games in the future as we move into the next phase of their existence and beyond. And I hope you find the game for you. I hope you enjoy yourself, and I'll see you next time.